Welcome to our weekly forecast for the week of March 23rd through March 29th, 2025. As usual, we're going to explore the biggest transits that are occurring this week astrologically, and then we'll get into our 3-card tarot reading to help you peel back the layers and go a little bit deeper. Before I get into all of that, I want to announce, as always, that you can join me over on Patreon if you want more exclusive content, if you want eclipse readings, if you want even private readings. There are plenty of discounts and opportunities to connect with me in group and one-on-one settings via my Patreon, and the link is below. Also, before I get into the astrology, I want to remind everyone that I published a really dense and supportive guide on the Astrophile Substack for Venus retrograde. And I'll mention that a couple times throughout this reading today, but I'm just resurfacing it to remind you that there is a really rich living document that is available over there that you can dig into for personal support throughout this retrograde period. Okay, let's get into the astrology for this coming week. So we have major transits occurring every single day this week. We also have an eclipse coming up later this week on Saturday, and we're in the eclipse window. We're also, again, in double retrograde. We have both Venus and Mercury currently retrograde in Aries, and all of this means that the astrology of the moment is very, very loud. And I've been saying this for the past few weeks because March has been absolutely the biggest month of the year so far, and really is the biggest month of the year period. And I know what I've been noticing is that it feels like things are moving both at high speed, but also as if a week is like 2 months long. And it'll be really kind of strange and bewildering to me when I look back on all that's happened over the span of like a few days or a week or 2 weeks, because so much is occurring and so much is being unearthed. And one of the best ways for me that I've been coping with the intensity of it all has been by just getting present. And honestly, at times stepping away from astrological analysis, stepping away from the tarot, and doing things to ground myself and to just like enjoy life too. I've been having a lot of really sweet experiences coming up and a lot of new connections, and that's been really gorgeous. And I say that in part because Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, and eclipse windows don't have to be catastrophic. They can actually bring about really gorgeous changes within our lives that produce joy and pleasure and connection and growth. And while they can also bring up challenges, I think it's really important for us to hold the duality of all astrology and to not pin ourselves down to horrible outcomes just because we're in a place of fear. So take what comes to you. And if you're having a hard time, like, that's not to invalidate that at all, because this can be very hard astrology too. But if you're having a gorgeous time, if you're having a great time, try to embrace it and to not pick it apart. And I just want to, leave you with that before we jump into the transits. So beginning this week on Sunday, March 23rd, we experienced the sun in Aries forming a sextile to Pluto in Aquarius. This could have manifested for a lot of us as a shift in the way that we carry ourselves, in our energy. You may have been feeling a bit more confident, a bit more social, or wanting to kind of peel back a layer, like an outer layer that's more superficial, and to get into something that feels more raw and true. So this could look like you connecting with yourself more deeply, connecting with your own energy more deeply, maybe taking a bit of a risk and putting yourself out there, or being a bit vulnerable. Pluto brings us into, the raw stuff, the deep stuff, the soul stuff. And so it's possible that you were sort of sifting through the surface layer to get down into the good stuff below, and that the sun sextile offered you that opportunity to sort of peel back the layers and maybe even show a bit more of yourself than you're used to. On Monday, March 24th, the moon enters Aquarius. And so the sign before Aquarius is Capricorn. So we ended last week with the moon in Capricorn, and we're basically beginning this week with the moon in the other Saturn ruled sign, Aquarius. And so when the moon enters Aquarius, we often feel a bit more detached. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not emotionally invested in what's happening, but it just means that there's a bit more objectivity that we feel the need to bring in. And that can be great for us if we're dealing with a lot of stuff. It can also be a bit dissociative at times, like let me back away and not feel because this all feels a bit overwhelming. And so it could show up in a bunch of different ways, but most notably, the moon forms a bunch of aspects, and I'm not going to list them, but like a bunch of aspects when it enters Aquarius, including meeting up with Pluto. And this occurs on Monday, and when the moon joins Pluto, as it will do monthly, always, the moon is undergoing this sort of death process of sorts, and it goes through this cathartic moment where we might need to release something, or we might crave catharsis, or we might just want, again, to get sort of intimate and real. And that could sometimes bring up some more compulsive feelings, some intensity where we're feeling more like gripping or grasping. And that could bring up some fears, some insecurities, or some attachment stuff. Like maybe we're just generally feeling attached to a particular outcome or a particular person. But this doesn't have to be extreme. This can be just a moment where we're feeling more inward and intense. Later in the day, the sun forms a conjunction to Mercury, aka Mercury Cazimi. And so we're coming off of a week where we had a Neptune Cazimi and a Venus Cazimi. And now the sun and Mercury meet. And again, Mercury is retrograde in Aries. And so it's returning to meet the sun once again. And this can feel like a burst of insight, a burst of maybe intuition or a sense of knowing. It can also look like a bit of impulsivity, like we're wanting to charge ahead and do something or make a choice or communicate something. We might feel chatty or gabby and like we want to really like yap today. And you could be speaking a bit more impulsively, doing things a bit more impulsively and not quite thinking them through all the way. And that doesn't have to be, again, doesn't have to be like a negative thing per se. That can be just a moment where we kind of leap forward based on what we're feeling and thinking. And with Aries, it's this fast movement, it's this forward movement that's very fiery and spirited. And it can be exciting, it can be spontaneous. And I suspect that this moment will offer us some insight on our own kind of decision-making processes, the way that we make choices, and how much we trust ourselves, trust our gut, and trust our intuition. On Tuesday, March 25th, Mercury in Aries forms a sextile to Pluto in Aquarius. So we're fresh off of this Mercury Cazimi, and now Mercury is having a little conversation with Pluto. If you remember, I mentioned that the moon was in conversation with Pluto, and so is the sun. And so we have these big hitters that are interacting with Pluto, the god of the underworld. And when Mercury forms a sextile to Pluto, we're wanting to communicate something that we have recently realized, or something that we're desiring, or something that's been unearthed. I've been mentioning in the last few weeks, as these planets have been dancing with Pluto, and now they're returning to dance with Pluto again, I've been mentioning that there's a lot to do with inspecting our desires and getting more honest with ourselves about what we want and learning or practicing communicating that. And so this may be a moment where you feel the urge to communicate a very real desire, whether it's to someone else or just to yourself. Maybe you're just contemplating it and thinking about it, or maybe you are actually having an open conversation about what you want or what you need, or something about yourself, right? Like unearthing and revealing these parts of yourself, or making space for someone else to do that, or both. This could be a beautiful moment for intimacy, and potentially you'll see this show up the most in the Aries and Aquarius parts of your natal chart. On Wednesday, March 26th, the moon then enters Pisces, and so we move from Saturn-ruled moons into Jupiter-ruled moons. Pisces, modern astrologers would say, is like co-ruled by Neptune. And that co-rulership, as a Piscean person, I feel pretty invested in. But Pisces is a Jupiter-ruled sign traditionally. And when the moon enters Pisces, we can be feeling like we're really sensitive to everyone else's energy and picking up on a lot. We can feel like energetic sponges. And sometimes that sensitivity leads us to retreat and to kind of separate ourselves or to go off into the abyss. I did a podcast episode with Amanda Moreno of Aquarian Spirals all about Pisces, and I'll drop the link down below if you want to explore Piscean energy more. It was a really beautiful conversation on Amanda's podcast, Aquarian Spirals, and I highly recommend listening if you feel like kind of digging into Piscean energy and symbolism and myth more. This is a prime moment for Pisces. We have a lot going on in Pisces, and so that could be of value to you. But this moment in time when the moon enters Pisces, we're closing in on our eclipse. We're getting closer and building up to our eclipse, which again is exact on Saturday. But on Wednesday, we're entering this land of deeper sensitivity and probably beginning to sort of feel more into the spirit and the magic of the moment. I think a lot with, the moon in Pisces, Venus in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces, there's this inclination toward poetry and music and soft connection and intuitive trust. And it can be a time where we're really expanding our senses and embracing the all and tuning into compassion and finding ways to really kind of soak up the meaning and the magic of the moments. And so this could be a moment in the week where you start to feel into that sensitivity, and maybe you go back into your emotions after sort of retreating from them a bit earlier in the week, maybe after the Saturn-ruled moons kind of brought us into some limitations or fears or anxieties, specifically about connection. And then moon enters Pisces and we're like, ooh, I kind of want the closeness and the sweetness and the care and the bliss and the beauty. Later that day on Wednesday, Mars in Cancer forms a square to Chiron in Aries. And this is one of 3 big squares between these players that has occurred recently. Our other 2, which have already occurred, were exact on October 13th and February 3rd. So October 13th, 2024 and February 3rd, 2025. These squares between Mars in Cancer and Chiron in Aries are interesting when it comes to insecurities around how we're cared for or what we need, and how that relates to our identity and our wounds around identity. With this square in particular, I've seen a lot of family challenges, a lot of like early childhood wounds coming up, and triggers around how our needs get met or don't get met. And this being the third of 3 squares is important here because it's a moment that will likely sort of tie up the longer story that's been occurring between the Cancer and Aries parts of our chart. We had a long Mars retrograde in Leo and then Cancer, and now Mars is direct and it's moving back over those degrees that it retrograded through. And so there's something here of like, maybe not like a bow tied on it, but at least more information or maybe a different choice that we make going forward that feels more self-honoring. And the decision to really take care of ourselves when we're feeling wounded, when we're feeling hurt, when we're feeling insecure. How can you respond differently to yourself in those moments and not sort of double down and recreate the harm that you experienced in the past, whether that's through neglect or abuse or experiences of abandonment or loss? How can you show up differently for yourself in moments where those old fears and aches get activated, and not tell yourself the same story over and over again, but instead take steps to care for yourself or to ask for the care that you need in order to feel safe? Also on Wednesday, Black Moon Lilith enters the sign of Scorpio. I don't often talk about Lilith on these forecasts, but this is a pretty big moment. Lilith has a really volatile transit, and so and there are also different ways to calculate Black Moon Lilith, which is not a physical body in the sky. It's a lunar apogee, and it represents the farthest out point of the moon's orbit. And so the calculation changes a lot, and Lilith will sort of like dart around if you're tracking it. But this moment of Lilith moving from Libra into Scorpio is bringing us into some deeper taboo material. Often this could be about, don't know if I can say this word on YouTube. I've seen creators like use other words, so I'll say the sexuality. Black moon Lilith in Scorpio can really bring us into the sort of underworld explorations of that part of our life. And it can also cause us to explore some of our trust wounds, our abandonment wounds, our betrayal wounds, and maybe reclaim bits of ourselves that have felt lost or denied in the past, parts of ourselves that we felt we had to repress or deny in order to experience acceptance or safety. And moving out of Libra, which is a sign that's very much associated with relationships, and into Scorpio, a sign that's very associated with deep intimacy, we are likely exploring these themes in the context of relationships. And that's extra emphasized because of the surrounding astro weather, Venus retrograde, even Mercury retrograde, and this current eclipse window. On Thursday, March 27th, Venus retrogrades back into Pisces. So it's been in Aries and now it's returning to Pisces, and very quickly meets up with Neptune in Pisces. And so Venus re-entering Pisces shifts us from cardinal fire Aries, where we were like forward movement, but retrograde. Like I'm wanting to like make moves. I'm feeling fiery and maybe a bit impulsive and wanting to kind of go after my desires. And then Venus re-entering Pisces brings us back to this space that can feel very spiritually inclined and craves this sort of deep soul connection and craves compassionate relationships and ones that are built around this sort of ethereal soul connection. And so this moment of Venus re-entering Pisces will shift our Venusian energy, and that can show up in our relationships and our style, in the way that we want to experience pleasure and beauty and arts. Our flavors might change, our preferences might shift a little bit temporarily, and we might feel more inclined toward like poetry, toward art, toward spirituality. And when Venus meets Neptune, just shortly after, it's like less than 5 hours later, Venus re-encounters Neptune. And we're drawn back into the abyss of the Neptunian and Piscean experience. And this could be a moment where we experience something that feels quite transcendent. Could be a moment where our boundaries are heavily blurred. We could be projecting onto other people or situations, and so that's something to watch out for. But we could also experience very real, deep connection and beauty, and sort of seeing others and seeing life through a more enchanted lens. And again, that can have its downsides if we're pedestaling or, projecting and whatever, but it can also have very definite upsides. There can be a real beautiful embrace that occurs with Venus conjunct Neptune, and also a higher capacity for surrendering our attachment to particular outcomes and really appreciating what's in front of us and what we're experiencing in this moment. So if you find yourself fixating or getting sort of caught up in wanting cut and dry answers or wanting things to be a certain way because that feels comfortable and safe, this might be the moment of the week where you're invited to really lay that to rest, or at least practice releasing that deep attachment to things going a particular way that you think is best. This could be a moment for beautiful connection and for really meaningful connection that is showing us new parts of ourselves and showing us new parts of love, showing us our capacity for love and connection and kindness and compassion. On Friday, March 28th, the moon enters Aries, and this shifts us from that Piscean energy. We still have a lot of Pisces, but the moon is at least shifting into Aries. And so we go from, mutable water into cardinal fire. And that is a notable shift in our energy. And it's also kind of the official moment that we're very much in eclipse mode, because now the moon is in Aries. And that tails us into Saturday, March 29th, when we experience our solar eclipse, new moon in Aries, which is a North Node Solar Eclipse. And so that means that the moon is conjunct the North Node. The North Node is currently in Pisces, but it's within orb of this new moon, which makes it an eclipse. And so although the moon is in Aries and the North Node is in Pisces, we still call it a North Node eclipse. And this is an activation moment, a really powerful one. And it's one that's nodding back to our Aries Libra nodal era, which occurred over the last 18, 20-ish months. The nodes shifted signs in January, on January 12th, into Pisces and Virgo. But before that, they were in Aries and Libra for about a year and a half. And we were experiencing these cardinal activations that had a lot to do with self and other, our relationships to ourselves and our identity and our relationships to each other, and really how we express ourselves in relationships and feel honored or dishonored or authentic or inauthentic. Our needs are getting met or they're not getting met. All of these contemplations around connection and who we are in connection were big and loud throughout that nodal era. And this solar eclipse in Aries is at a really critical point that's also emphasizing the same degrees that roughly the same degrees that Venus and Mercury stationed retrograde. And so it's within the same 2-3 degree range of where those retrogrades began in Aries. And it's tying in this bigger story that we've been experiencing since, at least March 1st, but even farther back could be argued, when Venus entered the pre-retrograde shadow back in January. And so really this material that's been coming up over the last couple months is very much in loud, big colors, and more broadly, the stuff that's been coming up for almost the last 2 years is very much in focus in this moment. And it could be an opportunity for you to really step into a new way of being yourself, a new way of sort of showing yourself. And it could be a beautiful moment for you to really step into a new degree of confidence and power. And this is probably something that you've been practicing, whether you're conscious of it or not. You've probably been practicing a new way of being. And this could really crystallize throughout this eclipse. I'm going to be doing a deep solar eclipse reading on my Patreon, and that'll be published later this week. And we'll go really deep into the chart. We'll talk about some of the deeper themes and layers and how they might apply to you personally. And I'll also do a 3-card tarot spread for my patrons. And that's available at the $6 and up tier and grants you access to other stuff too, including monthly AMAs with me and of course, the new and full moon readings. So if you are interested, you can go sign up on Patreon below. And I'm also offering a week-long free trial for that tier. So if you're interested, you can sign up for the moon tier, $6 or completely free for a week, and just try it out and listen to my last one and see if you like it, and stick around if you do. Later on Saturday, March 29th, Mercury retrogrades back into Pisces. And so if you're tracking this, Venus has re-entered Pisces, also retrograde, and now Mercury has re-entered Pisces. So these are 2 major ingresses for the week. And with Mercury re-entering Pisces, we're getting more Pisces. We have a lot of Pisces going on by the end of the week. We're back in the ocean. And it feels like we're really turning inward to some degree and wanting to maybe create or ideate or imagine from all that we've been living through. And so this could be the opportune moment for you to make art about it, for you to dance about it, for you to sing about it, to write about it, to make poetry about it, to do something to really sort of capture the energy of this moment through creativity and through practices that help you feel tuned in. That doesn't have to be creative practice. It could be like a beautiful meditation. It could be like a moment where you feel super compelled to walk outside and just embrace the energy of the trees or the water, where you listen to the birds sing and you feel something really meaningful and potent from that song. Mercury in Pisces is attuned to symbolism, to metaphor, and to the layers of meaning that exists beneath the literal. And this is a moment for us to kind of step away from attempting to be quite literal and to really embrace our extrasensory abilities too, and to, again, embrace the possibility of the moment. Something occurred to me this last week that felt pretty potent, which I was in my Discord server, someone shared a prompt that was basically asking what feels like it's blocking you in the external world. And for me, thinking about Saturn and Pisces, my 11th house, a place of future visioning and community and the future, one of the things that came up for me was, oh, there's so much collective uncertainty and so much fear. And I feel like it's stopping me from visioning the future because I don't have enough information. And then I realized, actually, when you don't have enough information, that's the perfect time to vision. That's the perfect time to imagine. When we don't have information and we're steeped in uncertainty, that is a call to deepen into our imaginative faculties, because that means that the moment is ripe for creation. So if you find yourself in a similar place where you're thinking, oh, it's not even worth it to dream, it's not worth it to vision, it's not worth it to hope, well, I would strongly encourage you to try to flip that on its head and to actually consider those feelings of uncertainty and overwhelm as the invitation to start imagining more, because that means that so much is up and so much can change. And when we make changes at a personal level, at an individual level, they truly do ripple outward and impact the rest of the world. The people around us, the creatures, the environments that we live within, it makes a difference. So I would highly encourage you to seize the moment and to use this end of week energy to vision anew. Okay, a longer reading than usual because there's a lot of astrology happening this week. Let's get into our tarot reading for this week. So our anchor card for the week of March 23rd through the 29th is the Queen of Swords. This Queen of Swords is holding what looks like a mask or a head, and the Queen is sitting on this throne of swords or throne of clouds, and she's fierce. She's fierce. She has this sheer shirt on. We can see everything that's happening here, and it's great. And there's a real power and confidence about her that ripples through the energy of this card. And this Queen in particular can sometimes appear a bit ruthless, but they are very boundaried. This is a queen that is very sure of the decisions that they make, is very clear in the way that they communicate, and is very decisive. And so if you're needing to make changes, if you're needing to cut something off or cut someone off, this could be the week that you're able to do that with a bit more pragmatism and clarity and confidence. Sometimes when court cards show up in weekly readings like this, it represents that someone with those qualities is going to be a fixture of this week for us. And so again, this could be us embodying Queen of Swords energy, or it could be someone else around us who is really kind of stepping into that. Queen of Swords is, for me, often associated with the sign of Libra, but it's an air card. We could also associate it with Gemini or Aquarius, or just sort of the archetypical energy of air and swords, which is intellectual, thoughtful, decisive, and often pragmatic. Our challenge this week is the Lovers reversed. So the Lovers is a Gemini card typically, and it's a card that has a lot to do with duality and decisions and integration. Often we're integrating two unique or polar energies with Lovers energy. We're sort of trying to make a choice or trying to step forward and to feel a deeper sense of wholeness within ourselves. And that often then allows us to show up in relationships more whole and more complete and more autonomous. With the Lovers reversed, this can often signal disharmony within us or without us, like within ourselves or within our relationships with other people. But often it also signals indecision or struggles with making choices that feel authentic to us. We might be in people-pleasing mode, or we might just be afraid of hurting someone's feelings, or afraid of sort of stepping toward what it is that we desire, because that also comes with some type of consequence. You know, this makes me think in this moment about sacrifices. Like, we often have to sacrifice something in order to move toward what it is that we want. And sometimes what we want comes at some kind of cost. Sometimes we have to sacrifice something else that is not fulfilling or that is not right for us in order for us to step towards something that is. And so if you're faced with a choice this week, a big choice, this is a really great moment to practice connecting with the heart, to steady yourself and breathe, to feel into your body and ask yourself how something feels. If you're struggling with a decision, how does it feel in your body? How does it feel as you sit with it? How does it feel as you breathe into it? Because the body will send you information that the head and the mind is not necessarily ready to grasp onto, but our body is constantly sending us signals. And so practicing breathing and settling into ourselves and pausing and not forcing ourselves to make a choice before we're ready, but instead getting really curious about what our intuition is telling us. That is the way. And if there are disruptions in your connections this week, know that they're probably here for a reason, and they're probably signaling to you something deeper that is going on that needs your attention. So consider those disruptions and conflicts a sort of symptom and try to identify what the cause is. For our gift, we have the Wheel of Fortune in reverse. So the Wheel of Fortune, often associated with the fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius, but also can often be associated with Sagittarius. The Wheel of Fortune, when it's showing up in reverse, can sometimes mean that there are events that are out of our control. And when we surrender our attempts to cling to control, to cling to outcomes, to cling to a particular way of things happening, when we try to control other people, when we try to control other people's decisions, it can bounce back at us pretty hard. This is showing up as our gift this week because it feels like we are learning to really surrender to what is. And that can look like acceptance. Can look like accepting what is outside of our control and accepting what is within our control, and beginning to move from that place and really focus on, like, keep your eyes on your own paper, basically. Keep your eyes on your own paper, focus on what is in front of you, and do your best to not get sucked into the drama of attempting to control other people or control situations that are much bigger than you. It's a very quick way to waste energy. And eventually, if you do it long enough, you learn how draining and not fun it is to try to control stuff that is not within your control. And so this week, as we build up to this solar eclipse, very real, especially with Venus and Mercury re-entering Pisces too. Where do you need to release? Where do you need to surrender? Where do you need to accept? This is a gift. Remember that. It's a gift because when you exhale, you then lead into the inhale. It brings some degree of balance. There's balance from giving and receiving, from surrendering and welcoming. And when we clear space, when we clear energy, when we stop fixating or stop controlling, we inevitably make space for something new to emerge. And that new thing is often so much more beautiful than what we could have imagined. And so if you find yourself caught in a state of fixating on what you don't have or what's not working, well, ask yourself, why are you afraid to shift? What's holding you back from making a different choice or from letting go or from showing up in a new way? Good contemplations for this week. Okay. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you get value from these weekly readings, please do like, comment, subscribe, and share. And again, if you want more, you can join me over on Patreon, starting at $6 a month for my new and full moon readings and my monthly AMAs, where you get to ask me a question and get like a mini reading. So it's a pretty sweet deal. I hope to see you there, and I hope you have a good week.